right, so today we are in Are You Covenanted Part 22. We're continuing here in the book of Proverbs. And what we've been doing as we're going through Proverbs is looking at covenanting through the non-mechanical parts of it. In other words, there's a lot of mechanical parts to a covenant, because we talk about a covenant as a relationship that, when it's set in place, has an expectation of certain things that would be specified things, specific things that would be done or not done. That's the mechanics of it. But there's also a heart part to it, an attitude part, a character part, an approach that's important. That's why we talk about ultimately what the Father, I haven't said this in a long time, but what we're doing is ultimately we're trying to become the type of person the Father and Son would want to live with forever. Isn't that ultimately what we're trying to do? Become the type of people they would want to live with forever. Because after all, the whole point of all of this is to get to that place where you hear, "Well done, good and trustworthy servant," enter into that forever. And so what we in the past have talked about many times is, what does that look like then? If we're trying to become the type of person that he would want to live with forever, what does that look like? And the simple answer to that is the mechanics, which is Torah observance, obeying the commandments, because after all, the covenant was, I will speak and you will do. So you agree to whatever I say you're going to do. Exodus 19, around verse 5 and 6, that's the covenant. However, it needs to be done in the fruit of the Spirit. You have to do it lovingly, joyfully, patient, kind, gentle, etc. Okay? So what we've been dealing with in Proverbs is that other half of it. The half that has to do with how we do it, why we do it, what's behind our hearts and our thoughts as we do what he says to do. Because I don't think any of us want to spend forever with a bunch of people that are only there because they felt like they were forced to do it, and they didn't really want to do it, and they're kind of miserable about it. Yeah, I did what he said and everything, but I didn't really want to do it. It messed up my ability to make money or this or that or some other thing, and I'm still holding on to that. Or I lost friends over it or family members over it, and I'm still bitter over that. And we need to not have that be in us, because that becomes that thing called the root of bitterness that leads to all kinds of ugly and death. And so we don't want to do that. Now, one of the things we talked about here is that motivated us to get into the verses in chapter 3 is because in verse 17 of chapter 2, it talked about the person that had forgotten the covenant with Elohim, being distracted by all the other endeavors and pursuits of life. It's not that they actually forgot. They just got real busy doing other things, or had other desires and motivators driving where you're going, driving your thoughts and your decisions and your actions. Remember, we talk about that whole process over and over again. We think about things, the more we meditate on it, dwell on it, and obsess on it, eventually that stuff goes into our heart, where emotions get all attached to it, and then what happens next? You do something. Or you stop doing something because the emotions and the thoughts are all about, well, I don't want to do that anymore, or I don't like to do that, or, hey, I really want to do this and I don't care what anybody says, but I want to do it. And so we start to get in that rebellious place, and in doing so, we forget that we made an agreement to do what he says, but to do it with all of our heart, not just to do it begrudgingly or, mechanically or out of fear. Because the fear that we should have is not being afraid, but out of awe, reverence, respect, and being afraid to disappoint and let down. So we get here into Proverbs, and Shlomo is teaching his son, and he's talking to us as well as children of Elohim, saying, look, we'll go back to the beginning of verse 1 of chapter 3 and just read through the first 7 verses quickly. My son, do not forget my Torah. Let your heart watch over my commands. For length of days and long life and peace they add to you, but not just because you did it mechanically, but because, he says, let not kindness and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. See, we're dealing with the approach now. Hopefully, before we got to Proverbs, you knew you well, we made a strong argument in case that you need to do this stuff. Well, actually, you don't. You only need to do it if you want to be covenanted, because the covenant is an agreement to do this stuff. What stuff? Whatever he says. Whatever that is, whatever he says. And so now we're talking about the heart and the approach to it. He says, if you do that, he says, thus you will find favor and good insight in the eyes of Elohim and man. Trust in Yahweh with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Know him in all your ways, and he makes all your paths straight. And so, again, we talked about how relationally, you have to have a relationship with him so you understand why he instructed us to do things. You know, we talked about it today. Today is Shabbat. We opened up service by saying, Father, we appreciate that you cared enough about us to know that we would need this day. So you created this day at the beginning of creation. Right after you created us, you created what we would need most, which is that time to spend with you. That's knowing him. Instead of saying, well, you know, we got to keep that day and I can't go to work and all my friends go and hang out on Saturday and oh, what an awful thing. But rather to realize, no, he cared about you, thought about you, and loved you enough to make this time set apart. He did it for you. It doesn't do him any good at all. He doesn't need this time. Do you think Yahweh was tired? Anybody really think Yahweh was exhausted, tired after creating everything in 6 days? I don't think so. But he knew he needed to teach us a pattern of behavior. Labor for 6 days, rest and focus on him in 1 day. And so he thought enough about us to create this time. So it says here to know him in all your ways. So when you keep Shabbat, you should be knowing why he did it. It's not just to see if you'll obey. It's because he knew you would need this time. He didn't tell you to stop eating the shrimp just because he wanted to spoil all your fun or whatever it is that you liked. It's because he knew it was bad for you. And it took science a long time to figure out that a lot of this stuff was bad for people. Oh, those voodoo, those Jews were doing in the dark ages and they weren't dying of the plague. Well, they weren't eating pig. So they weren't getting trichinosis. Wow, it's amazing that Yahweh knew that. And it told them not to eat it. And so know him in all of it. So have that relationship with him so you understand what's motivating him so that we know what should be motivating us in the doing of what he says to do and the not doing what he says not to do. And if you don't know, if you don't understand, you should have enough things that you do know that says, well, you know what? I don't know that yet, but it's okay. All the other things I know prove enough for me that I should just be trusting him. Doesn't mean that you're going to need to know everything. In other words, have a relationship with everything you do, understand it completely, as far as the why and everything. You need to understand what to do, when to do it, how to do it. But you may not fully understand why. Well, why can't we do this, or why does he want us to do that? But he tells you enough of those things that you should now be able to say, I'm ready to trust anything he says because of how amazing all the rest of it has been. I don't need everything, because I have people saying to me, arms crossed across their chest, going, well, I ain't doing it till I understand it. I said, did you understand the covenant part? In Exodus 19, he says, if you agree to do everything I say, not everything that I say that you understand, but everything I say. All you need to understand is who you're dealing with. Do you understand who it is you're dealing with? The creator of the universe, the one who gives you breath, life, provides you with everything you need. So you should have enough evidence of all of that the one or two or three things that you don't really grasp fully, so what? Do them anyway. Or don't do them if he says not to do them. But trusting that one day you might figure it out, but it's unnecessary for you to figure it out. He got them, always remember this, he got them to agree to the covenant before he actually said anything. He said, I want you to agree. And by the way, this isn't Nancy Pelosi and the government saying, I'll let you read it after you vote it in, okay? This is Yahweh, the creator of the universe, who says, you need to trust me enough that you're agreeing in advance that you want me to take care of all your needs, and in order to get that, you're going to agree to trust me to do everything I say. I want you to agree to that, he says, before I tell you all the details. But remember, he had already freed them from slavery, took them out of bondage, did the signs and wonders, split the sea, provided them with things in the desert to eat. So it's not like they had nothing to kind of base this on. They personally experienced incredible miracles by any standard. And so he's saying, look, you need to know him in all your ways. Well, good. You know who he is? Then I need to show that in all my ways, that I'm trusting him, I'm believing him, I'm doing what he says, I'm not doing what he says not to do because of knowing him. I might not understand why he says do this and do that. It's okay. Some of that stuff that I didn't understand why many, many years ago, I understand now because over time, that stuff gets revealed. But you should already have enough experientially that you don't need to know everything, but you know enough to know who you're dealing with. And that's all like, well, you know who you're dealing with. I don't want to sound that way, but you're having a relationship with the Creator, the King, the sovereign of the universe, and he has chosen to make an opportunity for you to covenant with him. If that doesn't inspire you and blow your mind, you've gotten jaded too much by the fact that you've been doing this maybe your whole life and you were raised in some whatever. No, this is the Creator of all things allowing you to have a relationship, an intimate relationship, a covenant relationship with him. That should just freak you out almost. I mean, that's incredible stuff. But we take it for granted. So we're told here in verse 6, know him in all your ways, and he makes all your paths straight. Because if you know him in all your ways, that means you're going to be doing his things because you know better, and his things lead to straight paths. We want to zigzag and we want to go all over the place, but it's a straight, narrow path that leads to the kingdom door. But we want to take all the detours and zigzag all over the place. He says, don't be wise in your own eyes, fear Yahweh and turn away from evil. So now let's take this forward into the rest of the chapter. The reason he says to all of this stuff is because it is healing to your navel and moistening to your bones. So some of you that are struggling with health, and I want to word this really in a correct way. I want to be careful. I'm not saying if you're sick because you're breaking covenant or breaking commandments. But maybe the reason you're not getting well is because you're not focusing on keeping commandments. Did I word that well? Did you understand? Did you follow that? I'm not saying necessarily, even though you could be, he could be just trying to get your attention, allowing you to be sick. What I'm saying is I'm not saying that it's sin and breaking commandments that is affecting your health necessarily. But you're not getting healed. If you're not getting healed, maybe because he's waiting for you to realize he's utilizing that sickness or situation to get your attention. And so maybe there's something that you need to be working on. Now, it could be time and chance. You could have, like a lot of us do, one of those kind of ongoing cough things like half the country has that doesn't seem to want to go away. That still doesn't mean that Yahweh may not be using it to get your attention. It may just be time and chance. What I'm saying is examine your life and your situation because he says it's healing to your navel and moistening to your bones. In other words, he's saying there's a health component to this. If you would not be wise in your own eyes, fear Yahweh and turn away from evil, evil as defined as what? Doing anything that goes against what he has decided it's supposed to be. In other words, using something for something it wasn't meant to be used for, doing something you were not designed to do, not doing things that you were designed to do. In other words, going against the way he has set in motion. That is called evil according to him. But if you would fear Yahweh and turn away from evil, it may affect your health. Esteem Yahweh with your goods and with the first fruits of all your increase. So in this wisdom, in this understanding, there's Shlomo wanting to mess with your finances. That's right. And the little baby's like, yeah. Eliadah's like, you tell him. Okay? He says, look, you need to understand that tithing is not a scam by the ministries to get your money. We talked about this in the tithing teaching. He says to esteem Yahweh in doing these things. Doing these things brings glory and honor and esteem to Yahweh. You're honoring what he has said to do. Esteem him with your goods and with the increase of your first fruits. That's your tithing and your offering. He says, if you would do this, then your storehouses will be filled with plenty, and your vats overflow with new wine. Well, that shouldn't surprise you, because what does the covenant say? If you'll do what I say, you will have everything you need. Well, one of the things he says is to make tithing, is to give your tithes and offerings. And then he says, well, if you give me what I asked you to give me, you will have abundance to overflowing. I mean, that's exactly 100% in line with everything that covenant says. Do what I say, and you will have lack of nothing. You will not have a problem with fertility, you or your animals. You won't have a problem with abundance. You won't have a problem with being safe in your dwellings. You won't have to fear from your enemies. You'll have total protection. You see, this is just a part of that same covenantal thing. And here, Shlomo's saying, look, get your attitude right. Get your head wrapped around all these things. Know him in all your ways. And notice where he goes right away. He goes to meddling with your stuff and your money. Why? Why does he do that? Probably because it's the hardest place for us to deal with obedience. It's one of those places that we're most challenged, is what do we do with our money? Do we esteem him in our goods and with the first fruits of our increase? Or are we still reluctant to take that first tithe right off the top when the check comes? Are we reluctant to take that second tithe, which is a commandment to benefit you? By the way, the first tithe is a commandment to benefit you too. Without Levites or priests, whether it's Melchizedekian or Levitical, being supported by tithes and offerings, you don't have any of this. Of course, there's a lot of people out there on YouTube land who think we don't need any of this. Well, that's all fine and good. But if you think you need all of this, it's being supported by the commandment to tithe and offer. And otherwise, you wouldn't have all of this. Now, I'm not a ministry that's going to sit here like a lot of them do at the end of the year going, well, you know, without your support, none of this would be possible. No. With or without your support, if he wanted it, it's going to happen. If he didn't want it, it's not going to happen. You get an opportunity to participate in it, though. And you receive blessing or not based on your level of participation in the things Yahweh says to do, and that includes tithing and offerings. It's not limited to that. It includes everything he said. Sabbath keeping, feast keeping, how you eat, how you treat each other, how you love your neighbor as yourself, equal weights and measures, a hard day's work for an honest day's pay. There's all kinds of commandments that you get an opportunity to show him how you are obeying or not. But ultimately, hopefully you understand this, all commandments are for your benefit. They are to bless you. We go through this every time. Keep you safe. And this is the key, to transform you from who you are and what you are in character into what he is. It is a transformative vehicle. So there's nothing about that burdensome, terrible law. It's all for you. Does Yahweh need your money? Does it really affect him personally when you eat wrong? Does it affect him when you don't keep feasts? See, there was a mythological idea in Greek mythology, Roman mythology, like in those ancient mythologies, that when we don't worship them and attend to them, that somehow it diminishes their power and they start to die and that kind of thing. They live off of the worship of people. Yahweh does not need us for anything. Nothing we do affects him directly, except for one thing. It's his desire to have people to live with forever. So all we're affecting is something that he wants to see happen. But he allows us to have the free will to choose if we participate in that. But don't for a second think that Torah observance somehow is about him. It's about him only from the point of that it's a covenant. We have come into an agreement, a relationship with him, but all of it's about you. It's to bless you, keep you safe, and change you. Oh, but see, that's where the mainstream has totally missed the whole boat. They missed the whole point because they want to do away with all of that. They want to do away with what blesses you, keeps you, and changes you. Because they don't understand that it's not a punishment this whole Melchizedekian teaching that's out there, the book of the law versus the book of the covenant, blah, blah, blah. That whole thing is all about this concept that somehow there's laws that are horrible and against us, and we're only there to burden us and punish us. He gave us additional laws to clarify things that we were screwing up and didn't understand. So the more we were messing things up, the more he had to give us laws to explain, that's not how you do that. This is how you do that. This is how that relationship works. This is how this is supposed to function. This is what you're not supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to do. But all of that is still to benefit you. Because I know when we get to the end of Deuteronomy, which is after all of those supposed laws that were against you and blah, 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 Moses says, anybody remember a guy named Moses? Did Moses understand better than we do all this stuff? You bet. He said in verse 11 of chapter 30, this command that I'm commanding you today is not hard, not far off. You don't have to go into heavens or across the sea to get it, but it's near you and it should be in your heart and in your mouth. He said, I'm laying before you life and death. Choose life. Oh, no, that was that awful stuff. That was the laws that were against us and blah, 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 blah. They're not understanding what the New Testament is talking about there. Every bit of the Torah is for your benefit. It's not for his benefit. He said, hey, I could raise rocks up to do this. He said to Moses, hey, why don't we just kill all of them and start with a whole bunch of new people? I mean, I can't just keep doing that if I need to. Just keep wiping them out, start again, wipe them out. I'll get what I need eventually. Why do you think it's been so many generations? Only so many in each generation are figuring it out. They're understanding the relationship that he desires. He's patient. We talked about, well, why would he tarry? Well, he's tarrying because he's waiting on us. He's waiting on whatever number of human beings that have ever lived are the number that he wants to do the next step. To have the light bulb go on. When I say light bulb, I don't mean he opened your eyes and opened your ears. That's already part of that. But when you realize that he opened your eyes and ears for a reason, and you start to embrace the reason, and you start walking forward, knowing and embracing that reason, now he's got something to work with. Because now you are changing from what you are into what he is. And so that's the important part of all this. But yet, oh, no, we want to focus on, oh, he just wants our money. He wants this, he wants that. Oh, we don't have Levites anymore, so we don't have to do that. Tithing was not about the Levite. Yeah, they got to have it. It was always about the person giving the tithe. It was a faith, trust issue. It was esteeming him with your money. Oh, yeah, the Levites got the money so they didn't have to have another job, so they could spend all their time focused on the work of the temple. And in helping the people, like examining their skin for things that were happening in their houses, for things that were happening, and all those kind of stuff. Really tough to do if you had to grab them off of a carpentry job or some other farming or cattle job and say, excuse me, do you have a few minutes? I need you to look at something. But they were available all the time. We need full-time ministry. Hopefully you get that at least, although that's being attacked everywhere. Although I don't seem to think that within the body that I happen to have an opportunity and blessing to serve, that there's any problem with the people knowing that they can call us 24/7. Because I'll tell you what, Robert and I get calls at every hour that you can think of. Because there's a need for somebody to be there to answer that call. But how do you think that gets supported? How many of you have a job where you are not allowed to take personal calls? Lots of people, okay? Maybe not in this room. We got a lot of people that work out of the house and stuff, but a lot of people out there can't take calls. So if your ministry is working at a job somewhere and can't take calls, how are you going to reach them when it's an emergency? Can you call that ministry person like happened recently and said, we had a death out in Canada? Can you come up and do the funeral or the celebration of life as we called it? Can you come up here and do that? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me check with my boss first. Let me see if I can get those days off on 0 notice. Where do you think that, how does that come about? Well, Yahweh provided that through tithes and offerings. But remember, it's esteeming him. You're honoring him. You're giving him glory and honor by trusting that what? If you do that, then your storehouses shall be filled with plenty, and your vats overflow with new wine. That's how you're esteeming him. You're having emunah. You're trusting him. See, the covenant was a trust agreement. He says, if you will trust me enough to do everything I say, then you can also trust that I will take care of everything you need. And not just what you need, even things that you just want. I'll meet all your desires. It's overflowing into abundance, right? Shaken, pressed down, and overflowing. But it's a trust issue. Can he trust you? And can you trust him? You better be able to trust him. If you haven't seen enough in your life to just trust him, then I don't know what you're doing. But yet some of you, many of you will call me, and I'll look at you like, I don't understand what's going on. Do you not trust him? Why are you not trusting him? But. Are you a sheep or a goat? If you're giving the old but, you're probably a goat. And if you're not a goat, you're acting like one, you better get that goat suit off. And I didn't call anybody a goat, but you're starting to act like one. Be careful. But. No, he said it, trust it. But we have such trust issues. We don't have enough faith. You know, even Yeshua said, when I return, am I going to find faith? People with full emunah that are really trusting. I mean, he's in the boat with them, and they're freaking out. And I don't think that it hit me until, it took many years to really hit me that these were fishermen that were freaking out. Okay? I don't go on a lot of boats. Little boats, fishing boats, that kind of thing. So I don't know how I would feel when a huge storm is coming and water's flowing over the edge of the boat. I may panic before the guy who goes out there and does it for a living. But these are fishermen who are freaking out. They're used to being on boats in rough waters. And they're thinking, we're going to drown. But they're not thinking, but we have our safety and protection right here in the boat. We're not going to drown. Don't let the evidence that's in front of you confuse you with the reality that Yeshua is right there. See, but we have that. Oh, but you don't understand, Rabbi. I can't pay my bills, and I just lost my job, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but you don't understand. Is he in the boat with you or not? Oh, maybe the reason you're panicking is because he's not in the boat with you. Maybe you don't have him in the boat because you've decided to go off on your own, in your own boat, and not take him along with you. Maybe you have a reason to really panic. But if he's in the boat with you, if you're doing the best you can with everything that you can, why are you afraid? Why are you panicking? And don't feel bad if you actually find yourself doing that occasionally. The apostles did this. Okay? And we hold them in such a high level. And he looked at him like, come on, guys, really? I'm right here. What is the point? I mean, and he's sleeping through the whole thing. And they wake him up, and he's like, what? Now, I have a feeling, and I've never said this before, I have a feeling he wasn't asleep. I think he had his eyes closed and he was just paying attention. And he's watching everything they're doing because he's testing them. Ever do that, right? You're lying down and you look like you're sleeping, but you're listening to what's going on in the house and you're kind of being aware of what's going on because you hear something going on and you want to see how it's handled. Okay? Especially for dads, husbands, right? The kids are going in to go through something with each other or the wife's involved or some other thing is happening and you're just letting it, everybody thinks you're asleep, but you're like, I'm really interested to see how this plays out. So you don't get up right away, but you kind of like, let's see how this goes. I want to see how they handle this. I think that's what Yeshua was doing. But they thought he was sleeping. Now, even if he was really sleeping, it's not the point. But I think it was a test for them. And he's watching them freak out. And he's like, I'm right here. But you have your overflowing water boat moments where you forget he's right there. You're in the boat, the water's flowing over, and you're freaking out. Covenant says, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, he'll take care of everything. Now, let's say, yeah, but I'm drowning. Well, what if you do drown? Well, then that was okay. That was part of his plan. He allowed it to happen, and there's a reason, and you don't get to understand it necessarily until later. Maybe you don't get to find it out till the resurrection. Then you get to, by the way, you let me drown. Yep, because you were good. Didn't need to go any further. Whatever it was. Okay? Because he allows stuff to happen. Sometimes he allows it to happen just so that we know this world is not the world we want. People back cars over children. People have cancers and all kinds of diseases and freaky things happen to their lives. People have all kinds of stuff that take their lives. And he allows all that to happen to show us that this is not his world right now. He's allowing us to have dominion so that we can see the result of that dominion. The covenant is we give up dominion. Do you remember your 8 declarations from the mikveh? What's the first one, pretty much? One of the first ones is, I, of my own free will, am giving up dominion over myself. I am giving up all of that authority and coming completely under the authority of Abba, of the Father. And I'm going to submit myself, and I'm going to take on the responsibilities of that commitment. That's all covenantal language. If you go through your 8 declarations when you went in the water, that's all covenantal language. It's a lot wordier than simply saying, whatever you say, I'll do it. But it's essentially the same thing. But in the 8 declarations of mikveh, some of you out there going, where's that in the Bible? It's not in the Bible. I just felt I was inspired to have people say these 8 things before they go in the water. You can find it on our website, okay? But the thing is, the reason it's a little more wordy and covers a little more detail is because you are acknowledging where you're starting. You're starting self-sovereign, part of the system, under Hasatan in the world, and you need to voluntarily and of your own free will come out from under all that. Now, Yahweh didn't have to have Israel do that. They'd already been physically brought out of all that. They didn't have a whole lot of self-sovereign issues. When they were in Egypt, they were slaves. They had no sovereignty. Of course, as soon as the slavery was ended and came out, all of a sudden they found their self-sovereignty and got all full of themselves. Oh, I like being in charge of me. And Yahweh's saying, that's dumb. You don't know enough to know how to be in charge of you. So I got to teach you. I got to instruct you on how to have authority over you. Now, this may sound a little confusing. I'm going to say this. I've said this before. Ultimately, though, you need to have full authority over yourself in order to submit yourself. If you're still a slave to Pharaoh, or a slave to the system, or have a slave, or have a high level of influence by a friend or a family member or some other person, you can't really submit yourself to him because you're already under an authority. You need to take all of that back so that you can give it. Does that make sense? So in a right way, you must become completely self-sovereign in order to give that sovereignty over to Yeshua. Because right now, some of you have other people sitting on that throne in your head, in your heart. Family member, friend, coworker, whatever it is. I don't know who it is, but you've got other people. Sometimes you got 3 or 4 of them take turns sitting. Because some of them have to do with different aspects of your life, who you let have authority in that aspect. So if you've got a whole group of sovereigns running your show, take away those crowns, take it in your hand, don't put it on your head. You're now fully back in charge, and then offer that crown up to Yeshua. But you need to get it away from everybody else. You can't covenant if you're already in covenant, essentially. You already have a headship, because who you listen to, who you give that authority to, that's the headship. Now, there are proper relationships where there's supposed to be headship. Children with parents, husbands with wives, congregation members with the ministry. But all of these are in a support role to the ultimate headship. It has to be in line, in other words, with that vertical connection. But a lot of you are still allowing people to have headship and authority and have a crown or a piece of that throne who are not in that alignment. They're not aligned with Yahweh, and you give them authority. So you still have covenants, which is why part of the 8 declarations is to ask Yahweh to annul any and all agreements you may have made, even conscious or unconscious, and not even aware of it, with any and all authorities that are not in line with him. You can come under authority with a ministry person if you feel that ministry person has shown and demonstrated that you're supposed to be with that person because they're in line with him. And that's where you're supposed to be. But why do you give other people authority? And it's amazing to me. I mean, I get call after call or Facebook message or whatever from people like, well, I watched this video and it really disturbed my peace and blah, 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 blah. A video? You mean you don't even know the person? But whatever they said in the video messed you all up. Why? It just was information that didn't line up with how you saw things and you didn't know what to do with it. So you call your teacher and ask. But why would you call me already emotionally upset, in tears, and all whatever, distraught because the teaching you heard by somebody messed you all up? A person you don't even know. Or some person on Facebook told you something and told you how wrong you were and that you were living in sin or whatever you were doing. Do you know that person? Oh, no, met him on Facebook, met her on Facebook. So why are you listening to them? I don't mean listening to them like informationally. Why are you allowing them to create such an emotional response? The only reason is because for whatever reason you're believing them. Why are you believing them? What are their credentials? I'm not even talking about credentials like what school they went to. Why do you think you have enough of a relationship with them to give them that kind of power? That's what I mean by credentials. There are people in here that have been walking this walk with me, helping them in whatever capacity for 6, 7, 8, 10, whatever many years. That's credentials. We have a relationship. You know how I care about you or not. You know how I've given you help or not in the past. We have a relationship. This faceless person who you have their name on Facebook, you've never met before, and you only know for a couple of weeks, what credentials do they have to speak into your life? Why do you let them? Because you're covenanting in an unconscious way. Now all of a sudden, this is an authority in your life. All of a sudden, this is a person that's speaking into your life. Why do you let people do that? You should be very careful who you let do that. You know, we have a real challenge, and I'm going to take this opportunity, it's kind of a sidebar, but to kind of work in, because I never do that, right? There's a real problem also, well, let me see if it actually, let me phrase that. There's a real problem in general with understanding the role of ministry. We let people speak into our lives because they claim to be a teacher or whatever, or we expect people to speak into our lives and they don't want to. You know, people will come to me and say, oh, I'm very concerned because some people are doing this and some people are doing that and they're kind of part of the group. And I'm like, what do you want me to do about it? I've made it very clear we're not a cult. It's not my job to micromanage everybody's lives. Is what they're doing claiming to be MTOI or under my name and with my name personally on it? No. Okay, so I don't like what they're doing. Okay, so you don't like what they're doing. What do you want me to do? Why don't you make them stop? Why? I don't have that authority. Oh, but they're starting this group or they're doing this thing or they have this blog or they're listening to these teachers or they're doing this other thing. So? We're here to provide you with a service. Literally, today, a service. We're here having a Shabbat service. We provide you with teaching. We also try to provide you with counsel if you ask us for it. How many of you have ever had me call you to get in your face to counsel you about stuff that was really just your own stuff? Never. Okay? Why? Because it's not my job to do that. You need to come to us. Now, if what you're doing is somehow causing a problem for somebody else and they came to us, that's different. I'm just talking about you chugging along in your life, you haven't done anything that would have affected anybody else in the group, and I come to you. Why would I do that? Well, we don't like that they're doing this or that or the other thing. Well, that's okay. Do you not know that all of you have come to covenant from a different place? A different spot on the timeline? Did you forget that part? Which means that some of you I'm going to say this in two different ways. It's going to be interesting how it comes out. Some of you are further along on the timeline than the others. Some of you think you are and you're not. That was the part I thought would be more interesting. But you're coming from different points to this thing called covenant. Different life experiences, different amounts of growth up to the point where you're here now. And so some of you have made decisions to let go of some things that others of you have not made yet. And so what? We're supposed to give them grief and make them stop, whatever, because they're not there yet? Philippians 2 is not Torah, by the way. But I love what Paul says there, and I think it's true for everyone. We're all walking out our own salvation. Okay? And let's also remember that when we see things, okay, here's one of those funny things. Is it Torah that in order to be an elder, you have to have your house in order and all these other things? Is that Torah? Who said yes? Okay? Who said it? Did Paul say it? Did Moses say it? Did Paul say, thus said Yahweh? So it's Paul's opinion that an elder should be all those things. It's not Torah. It's wisdom. It makes a lot of sense. We have to be careful that we're not taking a man's and guidance of his group and turning it into Torah. Some of you out there's like, he's disrespecting Paul. No, I'm not. I think Paul would be shocked to think that his stuff was called Torah. I know he would. As a matter of fact, he'd be offended to have his stuff held up as if Yahweh said it, which is why Paul often said, this is me, not Torah. He didn't always, but there were times when he said, this is me. This is my opinion. But we start walking around treating certain things that were written in some of the letters as if they're Torah. And they're not. Doesn't make them wrong, because the people who wrote them didn't claim they were Torah. That would have made it wrong if they claimed something and Yahweh hadn't said it. But once you get to Matthew, there's no thus said Yahweh except what comes out of Yeshua's mouth. None. Are we all in agreement? Even Revelation is still Yeshua revealing. And he says, this is the revelation given to me by the Aleph Tav. Do you see that in Timothy? Do you see that in Romans? Do you see that in 1st, 2nd, 3rd John? Do you see that in 1st, 2nd Peter? No. You don't see these things. Let's be careful, because some of you will come up to me like, blah, 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 about such and such and such, and you know what it says here? That's not Torah, leave it alone. Allow the leadership to decide how we handle that. Oh, well, you guys don't know what you're doing because you're allowing this person to do this thing and that, blah, blah, blah. So what? Where did you come up being the expert all of a sudden? You're the expert, you go run something. You think this is so easy. I'll trade jobs with you any day of the week. I got a guy right back there, Mr. Hat. Go ask Daniel what he said the other day about you couldn't pay me enough to have Rabbi's job. He told me that the other day. You want this job? You can have it. I don't do this for the money. I don't do this for the glory. I do this because he won't let me do anything else. Okay? Praise Yah. Thank you. Okay? But if you think, because remember, when you go to correct leadership, are you ready to step into that place? Because after all, you think you're right and they're wrong and you're so smart and you got the right answer. Good. That's what I tell everybody out there that wants to criticize my teachings. Fine. Where's yours? I want to criticize yours. Put yours out there for me to criticize. Don't just tell me how I'm so wrong about whatever. Oh, well, you know, what you said here is wrong and it doesn't say that and blah, blah, blah. Fine. Where's your teaching? You don't think my position is correct? Where's your teaching? Put it out there for everybody to see because you're so smart. Oh, but you're not going to do that, are you? Oh, but I'm not a teacher. Oh, there's a revelation. Then why are you correcting a teacher? If you're right, put it out there. Because obviously, I'm not the only one maybe that teaches whatever it is you think is wrong. People need what you have. Fine. Put it out. Why do you think I teach? Because I think the way I see things, the way I feel like I'm inspired through the rock to teach, is something that people need to hear. And they're welcome to do whatever they want with it. They're totally free to ignore it, critique it, use it, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's put out there free. But why would you think that you should just be the critic sitting there critiquing this thing? Well, where's your answer? Where's your teaching? Show it to me so I can have my input and show you where I maybe don't agree with you. Maybe I disagree. Put it out there for everybody else to put their YouTube comments and tell you what an idiot you are. We get them every day. People love us and hate us. That's part of the way it works. A lot of people are indifferent. I do not understand what motivates the people to actually post negative comments. I watch lots of things on YouTube that I don't like, and then when I get to that point where I realize I don't like it, you know what I do? I turn it off and go to something else. I never, ever feel I need to comment in a negative way. I don't even give them a thumbs down. I don't see the point. There's an audience for what they do. I'm not that audience, so why should I give it a thumbs down? The people that are their audience give a thumbs up. They love it. Good. That's for that audience. Does that make any sense? We got people that gave us thumbs down to the Rosh Chodesh service before we went live. The cameras weren't on yet. And we had 3 thumbs down already or something. It's like, what is wrong with you people? What bitterness and what anger and what ugly stuff is in there that you have to do all of that? I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about anything. I don't put thumbs down on any video I ever watch. If I get to it and I go, I just turn it off and go to another video or do something else. I've never, ever given a thumbs down or posted a negative comment because that thing is just not for me. If you are a mainstream Christian listening to me, you're not going to like what I say most of the time. So why are you listening? Go listen to a mainstream Christian. You'll love it. Why are you listening to me? I mean, this is like, I remember as a kid listening to one of those shock jocks in New York that was on the radio. And people would call in about his show and hating his show. And he would always say, so turn the channel. Nobody's making you listen. See, but this is a misunderstanding of understanding our role in relationships and covenants and all that kind of stuff. And so we expect certain things. You know, the ministry, we were talking about the ministry's role. We are here to provide you with an opportunity to have a service. We also provide an opportunity to sit down and break bread together. Do you know how many verses it says that I have to do marriage counseling? Show me one verse where anybody's doing marriage counseling here in the Bible. Finance counseling, business counseling, life coaching, job problems. Do you see anybody doing any of that in here? Oh, but you guys all expect it from us. And I'm glad to do it if I can. There's no requirement in here to do any of that. And so people get frustrated. Well, I emailed you like 15 times about my marriage problem and you didn't get back to me. First of all, it's not my job. Sorry to be so loud about that. So don't get mad at me because I didn't get to do it. You want to get worn out? Go ahead and counsel a bunch of people about their marriages for a couple hours a day for a while. See how worn out that'll get. You'll be on drama overload. And I'm not picking on the couples that I counsel. They have real issues and they're dealing with real stuff, right? But I'm the one that has to then counsel it, and it's not the one that's the problem. But you add it up to 15, 20, 30 a week, 2 or 3 hours at a time. Now, it's very gratifying, by the way, because this weekend, for example, I got a call from somebody we did have marriage counseling, a couple that was separated that are now happily together. Okay? And I was able to be used as a tool to help them see things a little differently. Also, a parent and a child relationship has been restored. I'm gratified by those things. But this is hard work. Oh, but we don't need to put any money in his box. He only works a couple hours on Saturday. This is the easiest part of my job. The Saturday part. And by the way, how many of you noticed that, not to pick on anybody here, but after we eat, how many hours am I sitting in the room counseling after we eat? It doesn't stop because the body needs. But you need, and then of course there's all these geniuses on YouTube and on Facebook saying, well, we don't need teachers in ministry and stuff. Really? Who do you go to when you're having a problem? Where do you go when you're struggling? You don't need us? You don't need somebody to go to? That's terribly depressing, actually, because there's nothing to do then. If you got nobody you can go to, then you're just, what do you do? But Yahweh put that in place to have a structure. Because what happened when you see this with Moses and you see it with his father-in-law, and what happened? People were coming to him with all their problems. And his father-in-law said, Moses, you can't do this all yourself. Now, Moses had 603,000 plus men, over 20 to pick from. Do I have that? No. We don't even have 100 people in this room, and if we count only the adult men, we got a very small number. So he only found, by the way, how many out of 603,000? 70. 70. Do you know what percentage that is? I did a calculator math on that one time. It is an incredibly, infinitesimally small, whatever the right word is. I mean, it's just unbelievably small. Like the period, like the decimal point, and a whole lot of zeros. That's how small it is till you finally get to a number. Percentage-wise, 70 out of 603,000. And so we are what we are, and we do what we do, and we have to be patient and understand that that's part of your covenant, is that Yahweh put in place leadership and structure in ministry. Go read Deuteronomy 17, and you'll see how the structure is supposed to be, where it lays out when issues come up and how you handle it. Did I give the right chapter on that? Right, 17, right? I don't know why my brain just, let me just look at it. Yeah. Okay. What did happen even with Paul? Paul's the big hero of the mainstream. What did Paul put in every congregation? Elders. But who was really in charge? Paul. What were the elders there to do? Counsel, guide, help. Always supposed to be structure. And the covenant is about structure. It starts off with us and him, and then he puts in people and other beings in the middle to help in that us and him thing, and us and each other thing, right? Because we have these two relationships that are in that covenant. They're really described with the two great commandments, to love him and to love each other. But we know what? We're bad at both. We struggle with both. We're ignorant about how to do either one of those. So he gives us people to help us in between the us and him and the us and each other. I'm struggling with so-and-so. Okay, then you can come to somebody. I'm struggling with him. I don't know. Somehow I feel like I'm not. Well, then you have somebody to turn to. But that's part of the covenant, is that he would provide what you need if you obey. What do you need? You need some human beings in the middle. He provides them. Paul tells us in Ephesians to go look for them. Basically, he says there's these fivefold guys. They're there for your edification, for the perfecting of the saints, until we all come into the fullness of Yeshua. Not there yet. That's part of covenant, though. He says, I will provide every need. Part of that is people in the middle. But they don't get to insert. This is the problem that you have. You allow people to insert themselves in between you and people, or you and him, instead of you choosing who gets to be there. Did you hear what I said? You allow people to insert themselves in the middle instead of you vetting and taking the sovereignty of yourself to say who should be allowed that position. Because people come to me all upset. I'm like, why are you upset? Well, this person said this to me, blah, blah. I said, well, who is this person to you? Nobody. I met them on Facebook last month. How can anybody you met on Facebook last month disturb your peace? Well, I've talked to them a few times on the phone. Okay, you talked to them a few times on the phone and you met them last month. Why is this person so important in your life that you're upset, crying, and disturbed and depressed? Unbelievable stuff. But you let this happen. Grab hold of your sovereignty. Do not put that crown on your own head, and then give it to him like you're supposed to, and then let him put the people in between where you need to be. Let him lead you to where those people are. Then you have to do the vetting to make sure that, Abba, is this the person I'm supposed to have there? Don't just let anybody get in the middle. And some of these people will insert themselves. They will start to gain control over you because you let them. And they will start to dictate to you. Anybody know what I'm talking about in your own life or other lives that you've seen? You've seen it. Don't allow that to happen. Because then what happens, you start listening to people out there telling you not to tithe. Now we're back to this. Because now you wonder why your storehouses aren't full and your vats aren't overflowing, so to speak. The metaphor for having physical abundance. Go out there then instead and find people that are tithing. Let them tell you their testimonies of how that's the reason they don't have poverty. It's the reason they have abundance. Some people are still reasonably, we'll call it poor, meaning they don't have ultimate abundance. But you know what? They've never had a problem paying their bills. And they will tell you, and they will tell you it's because of tithes and offerings. We have people in this congregation that have always been right about here, but they've always stayed right about here. They've always been above the drowning mark, and they claim, and I trust their testimony, they believe it's because of the tithes and offerings. Some of you, though, are afraid that if you tithe, you're going to go under. No, if you don't tithe, you're going to go under. But get counsel. I mean, if starting tithing is actually going to put you under at that very first moment, well, then you should be counseling about how to get yourself to that place. But you have to start here in the heart and want to do what he says. That's back to the whole covenant idea. Is it in your heart? Is it your desire to do what's right in his eyes and not whatever you want? And to see what can't be seen. That's the Hebrews 11. Faith, the belief, is the evidence of what you can't see yet. You believe it's going to happen because he says so, even if you can't see it physically. That's faith. It's not the name it, claim it faith. It's the he said it, and so I should trust it faith. Not the I said it, so he'll back it up faith. We kind of got that inside out. It's the he said it, I believe it faith, not the I said it, he's going to back it up and give it to me faith. Well, you claimed it. Well, because you know what we do? The claim it people are going to claim anything Yahweh said that applies to maybe specific people and claim it for themselves. So now you got to go back to Yahweh said it. What did he say? Did he say it to everybody or did he say it to one person? Yahweh told Sarah she would have a baby. All you barren women, you don't get to stand on that promise. He didn't promise you a baby. He promised Sarah a baby. But there are people out there that will claim that for themselves. He gave one to Sarah, I'm claiming it for me. No, you can't do that. Now, you could stand on the corporate promise if we were a corporate body living in the land under Torah with a proper sovereignty. Then you can claim that there should be no barren among us. Are we there? No. So that promise doesn't work either. Stick to the promises that he says are for everybody. Don't go grabbing promises that he made to one person and think it's for you. What he did say is if all of us were to honor him with our stuff, we would have abundance to overflowing. That's a promise to everyone. Now, abundance to overflowing in the diaspora, in the dispersion, may mean that you have enough to pay your bills at all times. It doesn't mean that you're going to have the mansion and the fanciest car and you can go and eat out every day. It just may mean that you have what you need, that you don't struggle beyond that. But some of you struggle because you're not honoring him with your stuff. Now, some of you say, but if I'm already broke and already can't pay my bills, how can I do that? That's when you go to one of those guys in the middle and you ask for counsel, because giving the money to the ministry only to ask for it back because you can't pay your bills doesn't make any sense. So you need to come to the ministry to help them figure out why you're drowning. And once you can figure out why you're drowning, maybe we can put a couple of plugs in those leaks so that your funds are not just flowing everywhere. Or maybe figure out how you need to get either a different job, a second job, or whatever it is. And then you can start doing what you want to do, which is honoring him with your stuff. Does that make sense? Because some of you are thinking, but you don't understand, Rabbi, I can't pay my bills now if I start tithing. Well, then call for counsel. Because first you need to show him that you want to do it. Not using your poverty as an excuse not to do it. I'm not saying just go start doing it and basically borrowing to tithe because you already are behind on everything. Call the leadership you have for counsel. Because this is all linked into covenant. And see, we just did less than 7 verses. We're only on 3 verses here. Trying to prove myself wrong, saying we would definitely do more than 7 verses. Well, we got a few more minutes. He says, my son, do not despise the discipline of Yahweh and do not loathe his reproof. Notice that that's completely linked immediately after the tithing question, the honoring him with your stuff question, the first fruits. He's like, look, don't despise the discipline. In other words, when you don't obey, what are you going to get? Discipline. He says, don't despise it. It's meant to just wake you up and instruct you. When Yahweh talked about in the first 5 books, when I think it's in Deuteronomy, when he says, and if you don't listen to me, I'll curse you 7 times more. At one point he says, and if you're not instructed by these curses, the curses are meant to be instructional, educational, not punishment just to be punishment. He says, don't loathe the reproof. Don't despise the discipline. It's meant for your good. All things he does are meant ultimately for your good. Do you believe that or not? There is a verse that says, all things work for the good of those who believe. That means whether it's good or not at that moment, it's going to work for the good if you embrace it correctly. Don't despise it. Don't loathe it. For whom Yahweh loves, he reproves, as a father the son whom he delights in. We know we have this as part of the Deuteronomy 8:2, and then if you continue forward, he says the same thing in Deuteronomy. So Shlomo, I believe, was very aware of Deuteronomy. So he's simply quoting it here. He says, blessed is the man who has found wisdom and the man who gets understanding. And he says that immediately after this reproof thing. It takes somebody with wisdom and understanding to appreciate discipline. Now remember, it does say, not here, but in other places, that discipline is never fun while it's happening. Yahweh understands that. We all understand that. But it doesn't matter, though, that if you can get through it, it brings the peaceable fruit. It brings the good fruit if you don't fight it and don't despise it and don't loathe it, but embrace it, to learn from it, to be disciplined and corrected, and then change appropriately. And if you change appropriately and go forward, you get the fruit, the good fruit. What good fruit? Wisdom, understanding. These are things we've been talking about for a couple of chapters now. It's all about getting and seeking after wisdom and understanding and knowledge. Because the wisdom and understanding should be about ultimately affecting the knowledge or the relationship with each other and with him. He says, for the gain from it is better than the gain from silver, and its increase than fine gold. So what is better? The wisdom and the understanding, which he says immediately after honoring with the first fruits and disciplining. See, a lot of you have your financial mess because you don't have the discipline to get your finances right. Okay, I'm going to smack everybody a little bit. Some of you are spending like crazy people and just like as if you have money that you just don't have. You need to stop that. Some of you need to get off your lazy you-know-what and go work. And if you got free days, work more. And if you don't like working, fine. Find something that pays better and do that. Stop just sitting in dreamer land. Well, one day you're all like, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember, but some of you are Ralph Cramden, and he always had like this dream. He's going to stop driving his bus, and he's going to be like this bazillionaire with his dreamer thing. And none of it ever worked. Instead of just figuring out how to be something other than a bus driver. Not that there's anything wrong with being a bus driver, but if it's not paying your bills, then you need to be something else. And if you are relating to any of these stuff, well, then take the discipline, don't loathe it, don't get mad at me. 6 days you shall work. Some of you don't work 6 days. You have extra time, go work. Some of you can go deliver pizza at night or do some other thing. And some of you can work 2 jobs. Some of you need to do all of that. Get your finances right. And if you don't like doing all that work, by the way, if any of you are all whatever, oh yeah, Rabbi, blah, 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 I promise you, not too many of you, I won't be so cocky to say none of you, but probably very few of you work as much as me. So I'm not saying this from a guy who's just putting in his 30, 40 hours and blah, blah, blah. No, I'm saying this to someone who probably works more than all of you. Maybe there's some exceptions, but I doubt it. I doubt there's very more than 1 or 2. I work always, a lot. Oh yeah, I spend time with the family, and yeah, I do stop and eat, and I do sleep, but I work more than just a 40-hour week. As a matter of fact, an 80-hour week would be like a vacation. So don't think for a second, oh yeah. Oh no. I'm not asking you to do anything I'm not doing. And by the way, those of you that do know me more intimately know that I'm actively looking at other ways and other additional things to do to make more money and create more things that can benefit the body, etc. That's only going to put more on my plate. Why are you all afraid to work? Or afraid to change work and get retooled? And when are you going to recognize that what you're doing isn't getting you where you want to go? And some of you are spending yourself into the problem. Some of you are not working yourself to fix the problem. Some of you have both going on at the same time, probably most of you. You're spending and you're not working. And you're not suffering enough because you've gotten enough to the point where the nothing you have is okay. You're used to it. And that's okay if you're okay with it. Then don't complain about it, because then you're showing you're not okay with it. But if you can't tithe, there's something wrong. If you can't give an offering, there's something wrong. Remember what I talked about in the tithing teaching? Tithing will expose either a selfish, greedy problem or a financial problem. If you have either one of those, it will expose it. You're either going to want to not give it because you want to, that's my money and I have other things I want to do with it, or you're going to sit there going, I want to do it, but I can't because I'm broke. So tithing exposes one of those two problems, or both. But are you going to take the discipline of it, the reproof, or are you going to just sit there and just whatever? Well, I'm 40-something years old. I'm 50 years old. What, are you ever too old to fix it? Are you expecting not to live to be 80 or 90, which is I guess, wouldn't most people hope to live that long? And so you got another 30, 40 years of frustrated broke? I want to walk around with a blowtorch without lighting fire under all your chairs or the anatomy sitting on it. And find that drive to do something. Because guess what? I get those calls. I can't pay my rent. Can't pay my car, can't pay this. I'm losing my job. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't, And I don't mind those calls. Stuff happens. But are you willing to do what needs to be done to minimize the likelihood of it happening in the future? Or are you just going to sit there doing the same thing over and over and over in that complacent? We talked about in here using discretion and having complacency, all those other things we talked about in the first 2 chapters. Some of us have just gotten really comfortable in mediocrity and nothing, and we're not aiming and striving. You want to be a king and priest? Where's that drive for you to be anything now? Let's look at the heroes of the Bible. Abraham, was he successful? Isaac, Jacob, even Yeshua. He had enough money in that box that he carried around with him that he didn't even notice that that Judas was stealing from him. No problem running around and doing what they needed to do. Wealthy people all throughout the scriptures. Why? Because they were industrious and they were driven and they believed. I'm not telling you to go chase the dollar, but get out of the drowning condition that you're in. How about that? How about aiming a little bit higher? You want to be a king and priest? How many kings, are struggling to pay their car payment? Or praying that their car won't break one more time so they have to replace it. Or, when was the last time any of you put on 4 tires at the same time? Very few. Why? Because they're expensive. And you want to be a king and a priest. I don't see any vows of poverty anywhere in Scripture. I see one guy that was obsessed with his stuff. Yeshua told him to sell it, because he was in love with his stuff. But that was a thing that was between him and that guy and anybody else that has the same problem. Love of stuff. The covenant's about trusting him. And what does he promise if you trust him and you do what he said? By the way, he says work 6 days. If you do what he says, he promises you abundance. Are you willing to do what he says to get the abundance? Do you even want abundance? Well, you got so used to having nothing that you don't even think about abundance anymore. Try it. You like it. Try abundance. It's nice. And I've worked really hard in my life, and I've had abundance and not many times. I've been bankrupt. I've lost everything. I know what it's like to have nothing. Some of you have had that struggle. I've had that struggle. I had to take my family, move back into my parents' house. You would talk about an embarrassing, humbling, shameful thing, but I had nothing at that point. But what did I do afterwards? I worked my you-know-what off to get out of that place to have. And I changed jobs many times because once I realized that job wasn't getting me to where I wanted to go, took a different job. Don't be afraid to change jobs. Or do multiple things. I don't know. And just spewing it out here, please forgive me. All right. But in all of this, he says, if you take the reproof, it brings the wisdom, it brings the understanding, and this is more valuable than silver and gold. Why? Because it's going to bring you all the abundance. You don't need to seek after silver and gold. Seek after doing what he says, and the silver and gold comes. So nobody's telling you to go and chase money. Be diligent, be industrious, be driven, and the rest of it comes. Oh, wow, I've gone too long. Looking at my clock here. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up there. Father, we come before you, and we're just so ready to move and to be light that fire in us, not that fire from a charismatic whatever. I mean, literally light a fire that motivates and drives us to strive to be diligent in being the most that we could be of what you created us to be, to maximize all the talents and gifts, to go out there and be industrious and to be about the business you gave us to do, to show that we can do and work. You know, Yeshua came and he said, my Father works and I work. How many vacations do you see Yeshua taking? He says, my Father works and I work. Father, help us to have that fire lit, to motivate us to be everything that you had desired us to be. Because I know that you desire us to be abundant and have life to overflowing. Yeshua said, I came that your joy may be to overflowing, to be filled to overflowing. So Father, we want to thank you for this covenanting thing, for helping us to see the relationship that leads to abundance. Because after all, the ultimate abundance is eternal life. So Father, we want to thank you, praise you, and ask you to inspire us to seek after the wisdom, the knowledge, the understanding, and to not despise or loathe the reproof on the process that's getting us to there. Father, we want to thank you, praise you, give you all glory and all honor in the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen.